Hey everybody, CVH here, and today we're going to be doing a deck tech of the Control Monk deck that I put together right after the Fall of the Dark Brotherhood's release. I just did a gameplay video on this deck on the channel, so feel free to check that out. Just wanted to throw it together and see if some of the new cards in this set helped the archetype. I do think the deck is potentially very powerful moving forward, and although I've only played just a couple games with it so far, I wanted to sort of just get this out there and show you guys my initial impressions on how the deck potentially could look moving forward. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of these card choices are sure to change. Some of them probably just aren't needed, and some of the old cards might have to move back in, but I wanted to give you all my first impressions of the deck. And someone did suggest that more deck techs would be nice on the channel, and I totally agree. So here we are with Control Monk post Fall of the Dark Brotherhood. Just going to go up the curve of Magicka as I usually do and discuss some of the card choices, particularly the newer ones and the more interesting card choices. A lot of them are staple. So Execute, one of those staple cards, just a really efficient removal. Daggerfall Mage still everywhere. Ungolem, we're still going to the late game. Good cycle, like the card quite a bit, can help you trade early. Proven Profiteer, helps you fight for the board early, and as we saw in one of the gameplay games in the recent video, the healing effect, compounded over time, can actually be very, very powerful. Fighter's Guild Recruit, definitely insane, against anything without ward, obviously. So Prophecy Guard, lethal, not much to say about it, very high utility. Murkwater Witch, I had taken this out for a bit. I have seen people play the Goblin Skulk Curse package in Control as well, and I kind of wanted to test it, but Witch seemed very good with the influx of orcs that I've been seeing recently. It's a really efficient answer to cards like Stone Shard Orc, Greystone Ravager, Iliac Sorcerer, and some of those aggressive warrior decks. So yeah, Murkwater Witch seemed good to me, and we can still combo it as always with the Leaf Lurkers later on in the curve. Three Thieves Guild Recruit's definitely the perfect card to play on turn 2 on a clear board with this deck. You're cycling, and as we're about to find out, the deck has a ton of things that you can reduce the magic cost of with this card. So now we finally get into some new cards with Astrid. And Brotherhood Slayer, kind of a similar card, but Astrid, 3-drop, 2-3 with lethal. So I already think this card is pretty decent at trading and getting rid of things. This deck obviously being a control deck, wants efficient removal, and Astrid is pretty efficient. Does not get firebolted, however it does get executed. But also, friendly lethal creatures have Slay, put a completed contract into your hand. So this includes Astrid herself. So in addition to the Brotherhood Slayers with just Slay, put a completed contract into your hand, we have Astrid also giving you completed contracts. Like I said, with the Thieves Guild Recruits, we have a lot of high-cost stuff in this deck, so the completed contracts can also add to our ability to get those out earlier, in addition to the Thieves Guild Recruits and the Eclipse Baroness we'll be talking about, and the Ring of Magicka. We have a lot of ways to sort of cheat things out a bit earlier than they should be coming out, so that potentially is very powerful, in addition to this card being good removal. And we already have other cards with lethal in the deck as well, such as the Fighter's Guild Recruit and the Sanctuary Pet we'll be talking about in a minute. So yeah, Brotherhood Slayer kind of functions the same way, loses the lethal, which is, kind of sad, but it doesn't get executed. It trades a little bit better as a result, and it has Prophecy, so, early Prophecy Brotherhood Slayer against an aggro deck. We're fighting for the board, we're killing things, and we're being able to get those completed contracts to play our stabilization cards a little bit earlier. So moving on to Crushing Blow. Not much to say about this, just good removal, and I think it may be slightly better than the Malefic Wreaths right now that I was playing. I'll show that in case you guys are unfamiliar with the card. Malefic Wreath, obviously very good against particularly Daggerfall Mages and Windkeep Spell Swords, whereas Crushing Blow is not, but Crushing Blow is very good at those pesky Murkwater Shamans. Can also help you with a little bit of reach late in the game as you start attacking. Penitus Oculatus Agent. So this is a card that also fights Daggerfall very well. One of the reasons I thought I might not need the Wreath so much. Steal a creature's keywords. I'm simply testing it as a one-off tech choice right now. It may be worth running too. It may be just probably not a thing you should include in this deck. Not sure as of yet, but it's been a fun card to test so far. Also really good at stealing Fighters Guild Recruits. All of a sudden, they wasted their turn playing a 1-2 for turn 2, and you played a 3-drop 2-3 with Guard and Lethal, so that's really powerful. Can also steal Drain, Charge, those high utility card. So Sanctuary Pet, another really high utility card. We saw this card put in a ton of work in the second game in the gameplay video. 3-drop 2-2 with lethal and summon Shackle an enemy creature in this lane. So we finally have access to a Shackle effect in this deck, and I think we really, really wanted it. Obviously, Giant Snake would have done it as well, but the fact that this comes out so much earlier and has lethal, functions well with Astrid, can simply one-shot anything if it survives. Obviously, against Archer, we kind of rolled high. There's a lot of really high priority things to Shackle, and there aren't a lot of ways to deal with a 2-2. They don't have Execute or Firebolt, but I do think this card is potentially very powerful. Worked very well for me early and late in the game in that matchup, so I'm eager to test it more. Hive Defender, not much to say. It's still Hive Defender. It's still very good in control decks that use willpower. So the Black Dragon is one that I'm testing currently. Not sure if overall this is going to be more or less useful than Dawnbreaker. That might actually be a meta call, but I did want to give it a shot. 4-drop, 5/5 immune to lethal, and we're discarding cards of like maybe the orcs. A lot of orcs going around right now, so I thought maybe if we can slay and get rid of all the Bankcry Butchers, that might be nice. If not, a little optimistic, but still 4-drop, 5/5, it can't be too terrible, right? So Anasi, obviously as Anasi, really, really powerful now. They've changed the ward creatures like Daggerfall to not proc their effects. If the wards are stolen, they have to be broken now, whereas before Anasi would have given Brett and Conjure the 5/5 and stuff like that. You would have gotten the tome off of a Daggerfall if Anasi was played on you. So in regards to Panitas and Anasi, they've gotten kind of better. So if there was a reason for some reason not to play Anasi before, it definitely should be played now in almost every monk deck I can think of, including Control Monk. Knight of the Hour, a new card. I'm testing a little bit more consistent healing options. We have the Bruma Profiteers and the Knight of the Hours instead of cards like Pillaging Tribune, which require a lot more setup, or Dawnstar Healer, which require you to attack face a little bit more. Knight of the Hour has been pretty good so far. Just simple card. Prophecy, Guard, gain health. All of these things are fantastic against aggro, and not necessarily the most overcosted piece of garbage in your hand against control decks, so I kind of like it. Moving on to Leaf Lurker, just very efficient removal. We want basically all the efficient removal we can get. Leaf Lurker is obviously on a stick, so I think I value it slightly higher than a finish off in this deck, but definitely since we're running the Murkwater Witches, I think Leaf Lurker is warranted as well. 3 copies of Piercing Javelin, pretty standard. 1 copy of Dawn's Wrath, pretty standard. Again, I don't know if necessarily you need 2 in this deck, or maybe you could play 0 and play Immolating Blast. I like Dawn's Wrath personally for right now, and we have a lot of ways to reduce it in this deck with the Thieves Guild and the Baroness. So speaking of Baroness, actually we should probably talk about that last. We have the standard late game of a Control Monk deck. I'm pretty sure this doesn't really see too many changes over the builds. 1 copy of Tazcat, it's a fantastic finisher. You can use it to clear, really sticky to the board, one of those ways to get far ahead in those control mirror matches late in the game. 3 Manticores, 1 Murok, 1 Odoving, the standard suite of late game, basically finishers, cards that just, run your opponent out of resources and end the game. Pretty standard in almost every control deck, you'll see these 3 cards. And then the Eclipse Baroness. So one of the reasons I really wanted to test this deck, and like I said, one of the reasons I also want to test it in Ramp Scout, this card is just immense value in a control mirror match, or even against a deck that just happens to go late against you. This is the card, like the others, that'll just sort of put you over the top. This deck really didn't have anything to do on turn 8 beforehand. Obviously, if you reduce the cost of this card with a Thieves Guild recruit, where you're able to play it earlier with the completed contracts, it gets, exponentially better. Summon and Last Gasp Draw card reduces cost by 2, so you're getting immediate value, you're cycling in your deck, you're definitely getting a reduction, which is never really that bad, and your opponent's going to be hard-pressed to find an easy way to kill it. There are some things in the late game that trade over it for sure, but unless they have a belligerent giant or they're racing you, the odds are low that it'll be a very efficient clear and you'll be getting even more value. So in the late game, if it's a race game, Eclipse Baroness is kind of bad unless you roll really high on its effect, but if it's any sort of a value game, this is kind of the card you want to see, and we did see it in the late game in one of those games, and as you saw in the video, it turned out very well, as you might expect. So yeah, that's the deck as Control Monk. My first brew of the build post-Fall of the Dark Brotherhood. If you've enjoyed the deck tech, feel free to leave a like, feel free to comment your thoughts, join the conversation in the comments, let me know if there's things you would change, other decks you'd like to see me deck tech post-Fall of the Dark Brotherhood and test on the channel. Hope you all enjoyed, feel free to follow the stream at the link down below, and I'll see you guys next time.